Good evening.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And welcome to the Village of Westmont board budget meeting for June 1st, 2011. I'd like to begin by having our roll call taken by our substitute clerk this evening, or our deputy clerk, I should say. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Ron, present.
Here.
Clerk Simsky, pinch hitting for her will be myself, deputy clerk, as the mayor had mentioned. I have to mention this, she is being sworn in for her third term as president of the DuPage County Municipal Clerks. So make sure you congratulate Jenny when she arrives. All right. Trustee Emery?
Here.
Trustee Fleming?
Here.
Trustee Nero?
Here.
Trustee Scott?
Here.
Trustee Seneca?
Here.
Village Manager Cyril?
Here.
Acting Finance Director Parker?
Here.
Deputy Chief Weiss?
Here.
Economic Development Director and Assistant Village Manager Kimball?
Here.
Fire Chief Trout?
Here.
Police Chief Mulhern?
Here.
Human Resources Administrator Casey?
Here.
Deputy Chief Brenza?
Here.
Deputy Chief Gunther?
Here.
Fire Department Administrator Scala?
Here.
Public Works Director May?
Here.
Fire Department Administration Assistant Brady? And I believe I've covered everybody.
Okay. Anybody whose name has not been mentioned, please rise. As everyone is well aware, staff has been very, very busy working on the budget for the upcoming year. I think they've done a yeoman's job. I think we're probably far from being finished in terms of coming up with the final budget. But I think the time and the effort that they've put into it has been very, very successful up until now. And in order for us to continue to provide the services to our residents that they've become used to, it's a pretty difficult task with all the cuts all of you have been asked to make in all of your departments and staff requirements, and just going right down the line. But so far, we've managed, and we will continue along those lines. And with that being said, I'd like to I have Ron give an introduction to this evening's session, and then turn it over to Spencer.
I know I once again forgot to put on the agenda the pledge. I wondered if we wanted to say the pledge and then go ahead and just keeping with our tradition.
See if we can say it right without marking.
That's right.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How soon we forget.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention to begin with. I passed out a revised budget timeline that shows tonight's budget workshop. It also shows the possibility of calling another budget workshop on June 13th, which I was anticipating the board would probably want to do that, given the fact that these reconciliation reports, you just started to get them today. Both the hard copy, and then if any of you checked your email earlier today, there'll be a link and you can go in and look at the electronic version, which will actually be a little more detailed. We had to narrow down some of the columns in order to get them to print, to have a workable paper version. Also, then if need be, we could do another budget workshop on the 15th with the goal of doing the budget presentation on the 16th of June and potential adoption on June 20th. And then we would need to adopt the appropriation ordinance on July 18th. So that's kind of the timeline that we've got to work with, and I just wanted to outline that at the beginning. At the last meeting, we talked about a couple of different things to prepare for this meeting. Obviously, one was the reconciliation reports, which you have now, and I'll turn it over here in a minute to Spencer, and we can kind of walk through and you can explain the different departments and see what kind of questions board members might have at this point. But on the top page, another item of discussion was if we were to suspend the VRP, and I guess I should stop for a minute and mention that we, as all of you know, saw the email this morning, the state did adopt a budget implementation plan that left alone the local government distributed fund, so we're safe in that regard for at least another year, pending no other action in between now and next year, but we don't anticipate any issue with that at this point. They did, however, take, and I forget the exact number, but several $1 million of the personal property tax reduction, I think they call it. In our case, that represents about $60,000 if we were to lose the full amount. We don't even know that at this point. But that's a far cry from worst case scenario. We're talking, over $2 million, almost $2,700,000 if they were to take all the LGF down to what we were guessing, about 5% would have been about $138,000. So it's still a big difference. But in following up on our discussion at the last meeting, we talked about suspending the vehicle replacement fund revenues and taking that revenue and putting it back into either the general fund or the emergency reserve fund. And Trustee Fleming had asked us to look at some scenarios for paying back the water fund debt. And you have a document on top of your reconciliation reports that give a couple of different scenarios. One of them would be to start a payback schedule this year, taking $200,000 of that $451,000, leaving $251,000 in the emergency reserve, and then putting that back in the water fund. Then we would endeavor in future fiscal years then to take $200,000 each year for the next 3 years after this year and pay that back. However, I should caution, we wouldn't be suggesting that we again suspend the vehicle replacement revenues next year or subsequent years. We would have to look for other places to find that $200,000 or other revenue sources. Or another scenario would be $100,000 per year, and you see that kind of plays out over a 10-year cycle. And then over on the right-hand side are just some things for consideration. I know it wouldn't be an exciting idea, but one thought that we had was an actual increase in the gas tax temporarily and designating that revenue just for the purpose of paying back the water fund loan, if that were something that the board would be interested in. Obviously, cutting our general expenses to be able to redirect that revenue is an option. And another option would be, we talked a little bit about the 2.5 cent gas tax that we currently have, maybe redirecting a portion of that and mixing that with cutting expenses to come up with the additional revenue in the future years. So that's what that top sheet is. We can either discuss this now or come back to it, or at this point, if we want to go through the other reports, I'll turn it over to Spencer, or ask the board at this point, would you prefer to discuss these options now or come back to it after we look through the other reconciliation reports?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is less of a sense of urgency than the overall budget is at this time. So I would rather talk about this a little bit later in this process. Since we're not governed by any state statutes or anything where this has to be paid back by a certain time. We don't owe on any bricks and mortar in the entire town, so we're in pretty good shape that way.
Especially with the options available. I mean, we may get to the point that of the three options between increasing the gas tax, cutting general expenses, or redirecting the gas tax in conjunction with cutting expenses, it might give us a little more guidance as to whether we're down to 2 options or even 1.
Okay. Good. Spencer, you want to kind of walk us through the different reports then?
Sure. So we've got several different reports, and they are stapled by department and then numbered also by department to make it a little bit easier to find within each individual department. And this is very similar to the format that we looked at last time. You'll see here it lists, the first one is legislation, and it lists the different categories of wages. You'll see the first column there that's in green is the budgeted detail, 2010 to 11, and that ties out with the information that's in the 2010-11 budget. And the second column shows the expense detail, which is the dollar amount that's in the budget. The next column is actual detail, FY 2010 through 11, and this is a column that is used if there were expenses that were not specifically budgeted, so the expense didn't exactly fall into one of the categories listed in the budget, then the expense is listed here. And then the second column is the amounts that fall into each category that were actually expended. The first black column is the budgeted detail, and this is where if there's a change in the detail from the 2010-11 budget to the 11-12 budget, or if there's things that are added to the 11-12 budget that were not in the 10-11 budget, that is where you'll see that detail for that column. And then the last column shows the actual amounts for each item that are in the proposed 11-12 budget, for the current draft that we have now. And I guess I'll kind of walk through it, see if there's any things that jump out. The one question that was raised last time is with regards to telephone charges, 50, 30, and the 2 is a little bit cut off. But under telephone, you can see we budgeted $1,500 and currently are listing about $2,500 as expenses. We looked into that, and about $1,000 worth of the expenses are supposed to be, need to get moved into IT's telephone item. So those are being moved. We're in the process of moving them right now.
Spencer, what about the Park District salary cost sharing? Under professional services, $14,000, and then actual expense, $21,000.
Isn't that for Bob Fleck?
Yes, that is the one that is for Bob Flack.
So I don't see how for 2011 it's going to drop back to 14. It's pretty similar to what we actually spent, isn't it?
Was it,
That was actually one of those things that I still had a question on myself, that we need to look further into, because when you look at the detail, they all are charges that are related to his salary. But I do not know at this point why it's more than what we anticipated it would be.
Spencer, this, for you and for the people and all the departments that have worked with you, I really appreciate this. This is exactly what I wanted to see, so we could see that very type of thing, where money was in places where it, was stuck where it shouldn't be, and then money like, obviously, it's only $7,000, but if there's a bunch of them where we're under budget, such as for Bob Fleck's salary, it's nice to know where we're, we have to do adjustments, because little things add up. So I know it was a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. And the other thing that, I don't know if it's going to be put in here under IT, but Glenn tells me that there's actually a software program that when the checks are cut, it'll automatically reconcile, so that you don't have to go back and do this again?
Well, he had sent me an email. There's either a software upgrade or programming that could be done on our existing system. I think, was it $3,000 or $4,000, or was it more than that?
I thought it was a little bit over 5,000, but
A little over 5,000. We don't have that capability now. Basically, what Spencer did now, and he put a lot of work into, exporting this data from that program into, existing software that we have, and then provided that to the different departments. That's something we can look at. I'm always a little leery when we start modifying our MSI system. It doesn't always seem to be as advertised, but it's something we could check into, assuming that we'll continue these kind of reports in the future.
And the other thing is, when you get down to conferences and training, it's deceiving if somebody looks at this and they see what was actually, the actual expenses were for various social affairs that the mayor, we've decided necessarily has to be there. But for instance, Winter Gala, we've decided that the village isn't going to front the costs anymore because it shows as a payout, but it doesn't unfortunately show the reimbursements. So to John Q. Public, they might look at it and go, well, I'm glad everyone was whining and dining on our benefits. So they were all paid back except for what was budgeted for the mayor or the manager, such as we had, but it'll be good in the future. It doesn't look like there's been an overspending by other people since we're not going to do that anymore.
Any other questions in legislation right now? And obviously, as there are more questions, let us know. We can try to look into them for you for the next workshop. Okay. So we move on. Now, the one thing I did want to mention that you may notice, right, under miscellaneous supplies, we've got a negative 277. That's the account where we have the snack rack. It goes into that account. So people are contributing, the donations are offsetting the costs, and that's why that's a negative expense amount.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next one is economic development, and as has been noted, the departments did a whole lot of work on this. We were able to provide them with some data, and then they plugged it all in. So as we have questions, they will be the best people to, they'll probably know a lot more about it than I do.
Maybe we ought to.
But maybe we could have Fred come up.
Concerned that maybe we ought to back up a little bit and explain that snack rack thing for the benefit of the public. Years ago, we used to arrange to have vending machines for our employees, and we had very mixed success with that, and employees weren't very happy sometimes with the product or the quality of products. So we decided to put a system in place where we purchase products and we receive donations from the employees, and we found as we exceed far more money than we spend on the actual cost of the product. So that's what that is when we say snack rack. It's not.
It's a snack rack profit, isn't it?
Yeah,
Profitable snack rack.
it's in lieu of vending machines, which
Yes.
are pretty typically found in most employment places. So,
If we're short revenue, we could always raise the prices maybe in them.
yeah.
Suggested retail.
Sorry about that. I just thought.
Thank you.
I guess,
Right.
Spencer, did you
And,
want me to kind of give an intro here?
Yes, if there's questions.
You'll notice if you kind of jump to the end of the economic development reconciliation, you'll see that we're really good, but in fact, we're not that good. We didn't, budget $694,000 and only spend $533,000 because conspicuous by its absence is the $151,000 paid to Don Morris Architects for professional consulting services. So if you add that into our total, you'll see that we spent approximately $10,000 less than was budgeted for economic development for the previous fiscal year.
Fred, would you give just a quick overview without naming names? You can name certainly positions, but please don't name names of employees. Like give what it means with the numbers that were budgeted for 2010, 2011, the current salaries, and why there's the actual expense is much less,
Okay.
if that's due to Don Morris Architects outsourcing, and then the numbers that have dropped significantly for the proposed budget and where it's going to work out.
Sure. As the board may recall, I think it was a year and a half ago roughly that we decided to offer an early retirement incentive option for two of the full-time employees in the Economic Development Department, that being our plan reviewer and our building inspector. And we instead decided, the board chose to go in the direction of privately contracting for those services. So the Economic Development Department was a staff of, we had 7 full-time and 1 half-time, and now we're 5 full-time and 1 half-time individuals in the department. And the difference in that is the contractual arrangement that we entered into with Don Morris Architect to do plan reviews, building and electrical inspections, and also there are some clerical charges that they assess to us as a result of that contractual arrangement. So all in all, it's been a very profitable arrangement, we think. Our permit fee revenues are up substantially from a couple of years ago. We, I think, peaked out, I want to say, around $400,000 during the boom times. 2 years ago, we plummeted to $130,000, and I believe we're back up to around $230,000 for the previous fiscal year. So that puts us in a little bit of a net gain position, and we have to always be careful and mindful of the fact that building and permit fees can't render a profit. It can only offset our actual expenses. Otherwise, it becomes a tax and must come before this body for ratification if it involves a gain, if you will, over the actual expenses incurred. So with Don Morris, we took in $151,000. Our permit fee revenue was about $230,000, which we can certainly justify that additional $80,000 is covering some of the expense for our clerical and administrative staff, the village planner, myself, the code enforcement officials, and so on. We think it was a very prudent financial move.
Very good.
When you get down to the elevator and plumbing inspections, and then you've got under professional services, and you've got the contract plumbing inspections, was adding the two together for the actual expense why you, again, budgeted $32,000?
Yes, that's correct, trustee. And I think kind of an error. The first column should say, or line should say elevator inspections specifically, and we broke out a separate line for contract plumbing inspections, which had been previously Mr. Bob Chatta, now his son Mike Chatta is performing those inspections for us. But you're absolutely right. Combining those two together, we come up with about $22,000. And you just never know what percentage of your new development is going to be attributable to plumbing permits and plumbing inspections. It's our best guesstimate. We guessed a little bit wrong in this case this year.
Okay, and you're anticipating a few more this year because permits are picking up, so that's why you're at 32?
Yeah, the plumbing inspections just for the standard market alone are going to be much larger. That's a pretty significantly large project in terms of the total number of plumbing inspections. And we're not just going to do a rough and then a final there, because they've got so many things with coolers and water service and kitchen facilities. Multiple plumbing inspections are going to have to be performed as well as electrical inspections.
Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard that we had 100 permits pulled last month alone
Yeah.
on all sorts of things.
Yeah, our AA3, not to name names, was extremely pleased with that. That's kind of her personal goal, is she really likes to hit that 100 permit mark. And of course, that consists of all types of permits: building, plumbing, electrical, fences, decks, sheds, roofs, and we kind of add them all together. But it's kind of nice to have a little bit of an informal goal, and 100 is a nice round number. That
Compared
shows
to where we
pretty-
were at.
Yeah, it's a pretty high level of activity right now, trustee. We find that our economic development staff, because of this high volume of permits, is busier than the proverbial one-armed paper hanger. That's it.
Fred, when you go to page 2 for property cleanup, is that stuff like, say it's a foreclosed house and code enforcement goes out there and determines, there's 3-foot weeds, and so somebody's got to go in and mow it, and we put a lien out there, but is that what it's for?
Well, that's part of it. One of them, in fact, was a court-ordered cleanup, where the judge said the village will go out, and I think it was one of those hoarding cases that we talked
Yes.
about before, trustee. So we had very little options there. When the judge tells you to do something, you just say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And so we did that. But again, a lien, the court said that we could put a property lien on it, so that's an account receivable with an indeterminate collection date, I guess.
Right, but then my question is, how come there's no budgeted expense for the next year? Because there's still quite a few
We probably
properties.
should put something in there, because we anticipate that we're going to do a few of those in the course of a year. I think that's a good point to.
Okay, yeah, because there's still a lot of foreclosed property
I
that,
think that would be prudent.
right. And what's the discrepancy in the municipal garage between actual expenses and then budgeting it back up to what you had budgeted for this year?
I just took the numbers they made me put in there. I don't know what.
Who's they, and why'd they make you?
I'm going to have to ask for help on that one, but I don't
think
know how that
generally-
number is calculated.
With the municipal garage, I think we've just kind of predominantly gone with what's been budgeted before. It's revenue neutral, so if we reduce the expense, then we reduce the revenue on the revenue side too. So it doesn't really have a net change. I mean, we can reduce it. I think the reduction in their number of cars is part of this reduction. We could reduce the budget as well. But, right, the older ones are gone. They're not as much maintenance. I think historically it was closer to the 7,000. It's been reduced drastically, and we can reduce it. It'll just offset the revenue on the other side too.
Okay.
Where does the revenue come from? Can you explain the?
So basically what we do is we book an expense to the individual departments, and then we book a revenue in the general fund for sort of giving the money to the fleet department. The fleet actually makes the purchases for the parts, for the labor, and then in turn bills the department. So this is simply an amount that goes to billing the department, and then the exact amount that's budgeted in these expenses is also budgeted on the revenue side. So we can adjust it, but it's revenue neutral. There'll be no change in the net, but it's wise to get it adjusted so it's closer to, more closely matches
And
actuals.
especially, can the adjustment come down to more closely reflect what it is, and then actually,
Yep.
are you able to move some of that money into property cleanup budget, or do we have to come up with that from somewhere else?
We'd have to come up with it from somewhere else, because the revenue would go down too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But our maintenance expenses should go down with that new Dodge Charger that we've got for the code enforcement officer.
Yeah. It's the undercover car to spy on the police. Don't tell them I have it. All right.
Boy, Fred, you sure did a great job on your telephone and your file cabinets. Yes. I'd like to commend you on that.
Oh, okay.
Anything of grave concern to you, Fred, that you're like worried about
Yeah, I
might
think
skyrocket?
in the future, it's, as we work with a reduced staff and farm out more of our programs like this, it's really important that we focus on training. We've got to train and equip our staff people as much as possible, because they're being asked to do more with less, so we've certainly got to empower them with training and equipment. We've realizing the gravity of our financial situation, if we absolutely didn't have to spend it this year, we just didn't do it, and we've kind of clamped the lid on a lot of those things. We've told some of our employees that if you want to go to your convention, I think the policy is, we'll pay your registration, but you might have to pay your own meals and travel expense to get there. That's discouraged a lot of staff from doing that. We don't want to let that go on for too much longer, because we want to have informed, empowered staff. And the stuff you can pick up at these professional seminars at SSBOA, ICC conferences, the American Planning Association. Our village planning engineer needs to go to a certain number of these to maintain her professional engineering certification. Those are really critical components of our budget, and we hope that we can keep those intact in the future.
I agree. Well, that's good. I sounded like a shill, like I was asking you had me ask the right questions. So you can explain. Looks good. Thanks for all the work, Fred.
All right, the next one is administration. If there's any specific questions, I think pretty much most of the stuff on the first page is right. The actuals are pretty close to the budgeted amounts. First couple of pages.
I know that one of the questions I had was in advertising. It showed some expenses to Banco Popular. We looked that up, and that was related to advertising. Banco Popular is the bank we have our credit card through, so placing some ads, we had to use the credit card.
How about the flex spending fees?
Yeah, what happened with?
You go 500, 3,000, then you're still budgeting 500?
On first page.
First page.
Professional services, flex spending fees.
I don't know that, yeah, I see it. I don't know, Kathy, do you know anything about the flex spending fees? Can you come up? That is, you understand what
No,
that is, right? It's our,
I have it in the office, but I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'd have to find out how much those are.
Yeah, I'm just worried.
It's based on how many employees.
Participate.
Oh, actually, we have to let them know how many employees are eligible to participate, and it's based on that, so it's It's
Really? So we pay a fee based on how many are eligible as
Eligible?
opposed to how many take advantage of the program?
Exactly.
Man.
Racket. Yeah, that doesn't seem very,
But then that still begs the question, if we're paying 3,000, why are we still budgeting 500?
Right.
And likewise, pre-employment screens is the other way, so that all washes out basically in the numbers. But why are you also not budgeting post office expenses when they come up to 1,600? We've got them as an expenditure, but not budgeted.
Would you like me to bring the plan document the next time, for the next budget?
Yeah.
Workshop.
Just so that, just make a note so that we can go back and you can answer why what it is and then why it's back to budgeted at 500.
Okay.
Where was the,
Down at the bottom of professional services, see the actual expenses?
Could that pre-employment be for the,
oh, right, okay.
that wouldn't be for police then? Oh.
No. I mean, for pre-employment to budget 3,000, we'd be planning on hiring a bunch of people, wouldn't we?
It's very possible that initially these got switched a couple of budgets ago, and since everything came out in the wash, they never got adjusted. It's
No, I'm
possible
not buying that,
that's-
Spencer.
No?
No. No, the auditors would have caught that. So it's just a matter of, because I realize there's small amounts in the big picture, but if they're all not current with what the expenses should be, it's not a realistic picture of where we're going to come to eventually to a grand total.
Yeah, I'm sure we can lower the pre-employment screens. I'm not sure why that's as high as it is.
I got a little insight on just that one. Even seasonals will go just for the initial screening, and if we've got, returning employees and stuff, then sometimes it's just the initial, for example, like a drug test or something. But if you hired a new employee, then they would go for the full, physical. So not knowing how many of the seasonal are going to be returning employees and stuff dictates, we only hired returning seasonal last time.
Well, wouldn't those come under your budget?
No.
No.
Okay,
They
those would
never
come under
have.
administration because it's
Yeah.
employment?
So it was left at 3,000 just because that's a typical, trend over many years, and we.
Well, the other factor too is it depends on the type of position. If you have to hire a department head in the middle of the year, you're going to be paying for different types of tests that are going to cost a lot more.
Right.
We can trim it. We may not hit it, but it can probably certainly be trimmed.
Yeah, because it's just based on projections for the year, and I don't.
Sure.
But I also think you ought to budget your, a lot of these expenses that you're expending, and they're necessary expenses without a budget, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that post office expense.
Ron, what do we do different in the calendar?
What is the calendar?
What did we do different? It's budgeted 4,500, actual was 52, and then budgeted for 11/12 is 86.
Remember there was a question last year about how much we were paying for the production of the calendar based on the number of photographs. I think that's what drove it up, so we made an adjustment for that this year.
Okay.
Just trying to be more accurate.
What's that additional for towing that's in yellow on page 2?
I don't know. That's been the question I've had for the last couple of days that I haven't got an answer yet for. That's a question that I think we put down in finance. I don't know if you got it to you or not.
I think it was a couple of years ago, when we started the administrative towing charge, the assumption was one of the additional costs that was going to be part of this would be some additional postage costs. And so because of that, the amount that was budgeted for postage, we assumed, well, we're going to spend roughly an extra $1,500 as a guesstimate due to towing. Now, there's no way to track when we actually make the postage payment how much really was due to towing. So really, the $8,000 and the $1,500 should be considered together as, it's just for postage machine refill. That's what the additional for towing is.
That makes sense.
So.
And that's sort of an unknown, because we just don't
Right.
know how many.
You're right, there's no way to separate
Yeah.
those two out specifically.
So you're saying in the actual expense, that 12,000, there's part of that in there is for towing?
Yes, part of that would be for towing, yeah.
Gotcha.
And your budget's 4,000 short on your actual postage machine.
For this year? The question.
What is this Neo post that I keep seeing through the budget here?
That's our-
It obviously has to do with the equipment and the postal and everything else. What,
That's the brand of the machine that we have downstairs in the clerk's
Okay.
office.
The provider, yeah.
so under the maintenance services, we budget 800, they hit us 1,100, and we budget 800 again? I mean, I agree with what Trustee Emery said. I mean, we're talking, a couple $100 here and there, but if the true cost is $1,100 or $1,200, and we're budgeting back at 800 again, I mean,
It wouldn't be a bad idea to move it up. Part of the issue that the department heads face as they're doing this is a lot of these expenses obviously don't come at the beginning of the year. So as these expenses, as the budgets are being prepared in November and December, we're working with numbers from October and November, and some of these expenses don't hit until later. And so some of these accounts you're going to notice are a little bit off, and all we can base it on is often not the current year's numbers, but the year before, because we don't want to keep changing budget numbers and keep changing and keep changing. We now have additional information that we're able to obtain, now we've got year-to-date information. We've got a lot more information, a lot more expenses to adjust the numbers if we'd like to at this point that were not there earlier. So you're going to see a lot of these kinds of things that if you look at, the information that was available back in October, November, might make a little more sense as the budget, but now with additional information, it's not a bad idea to make these changes. We don't want to keep changing the budgets on you guys, but if it seems like the logical thing to do is to adjust these numbers at this point, I don't have a problem entering in the new numbers.
well, it would only make, it would make sense that you want to go ahead and start working with those numbers the way they actually ought to be, instead of rolling back. Because maintenance, depending on the maintenance agreement or depending how it goes, that number's not going to decrease.
Right.
It's going to stay pretty much as a throughout a period of time. If you got a contract with them or whatever, that's what the number's going to be.
Right.
And
So
it could be a situation too where if something occurred during the year that wasn't covered under the maintenance agreement, you had to pay more that particular year.
Right.
We can look closer at that and figure out if that was maybe what was anticipated, and then we expected that to drop down again. We didn't look at the detail.
Yeah, as far as warranties or coverages on equipment or whatever that you have, there may be something that comes up that's not covered, so then that is going to be a higher cost.
Yeah.
Does this also not include the U.S. postal rate increases?
It does include that.
And that's a variable that's hard to predict how much and when they would hit us with that.
Right, but, I think because we're months and months past when the original budget was drafted, and now we can look at the actual expenses and say, okay, what numbers can we bring down a little, and more importantly, what numbers, we have to add that line by line like this, we could, foreseeably end up where we're a couple $100,000 short at the end of the day. Then that will relate back to, now how are we going to pay back the water department? And, how are we going to fund a lot of this stuff? So I think where there's things that are glaring, even though they're, comparatively small, but they're glaring, like the postage machine budgeted at $8,000, spent $12,000, we budgeted 8,000, we don't need a surprise. By next year, it's actually 14.
Right.
So, because then we're going to end up, slicing and dicing in the spring because we can't pay things that we should have paid.
Yep. Dig into the detail.
Makes sense.
All right, that's all I have.
Any other questions of administration? Did you?
Not to beat the postage to death, but there is one also program which we're going to, we come over and use the postage machine as well as budget for our own, but the Carfax program where we're not going to be mailing out copies of accidents, that also is going to result in a reduced postage. Also, not so much with tickets, but that's one thing, it's a possibility. Most people come in and pick up accidents, but there is also the possibility too that we do mail some, and now it won't be mailed now because it's all internet-based accident obtaining. People want their accident report, can now do it online rather than us mailing copies as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Spencer, I do have one question for you.
Okay.
Like in economic development,
Yeah.
you budgeted the expenses for wages on the line of 39-hour, 2.5%. But yet in other departments, the budgeted expenses for wages are line itemed out at current salary, which I take it would be without an increase. Is that correct?
It's consistent throughout your budget binder. You'll see that it's consistent currently with the 2.5% increase. I'm going to guess that it's an inconsistency, and they should probably be all listed down there, that 2.5%, to be consistent with what's in the budget binder.
Okay, because I just want to be sure, so if you end up reprinting these for our next, be sure you drop it to the applicable line so we know which number you're working with as your baseline goal budget,
Yep.
so that we don't start thinking that the line out there is current, no raise.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Finance is the next one that's in here. We'll also move those wages. You'll notice in finance that the regular wages the actual expenses were under the budgeted amount, but you'll notice that was more than made up for in professional services. As everyone's aware, our finance director was no longer with us for a portion of the year, and then, instead we paid for an interim finance director under professional services. I don't think that will come as a surprise to anyone.
The department seems to be right on the money, Spencer. No, I don't have any questions there.
Fairly close. The one thing you'll notice, and we're attempting to address it, my guess is that on the very last page, you'll see under bank card services, bank fees, the amount that was budgeted last year was $7,500. In previous years, it had been around 20 to 15. This year, we've spent about 15, almost 16,000. Obviously, we hadn't spent quite to that extent when we were preparing the budget, but we assumed we needed to go up to at least 9,500. We knew the 7,500 wasn't cutting it. We do have a few things we're going to be implementing to try to reduce these fees slightly. We've been closing some accounts. We're looking at different sources of wires to eliminate some wire fees. So it might be down less, but I don't know that it will be as down as far as the 9,500. And I don't know why the budget got dropped down to 7,500 originally. But
Well, when I saw those, I was assuming that there were accounts that were closed and practices that were different as of last summer with the
yes, there have been some
appointment of our
changes.
finance director.
Yes, there have been some changes, and we'll be making more. I don't know for sure if we'll hit the 9,500, but we will shoot for it.
Police.
All right, police.
It's got lots of pages to it, Chief.
Yeah.
Police is a slightly larger department than finance, as you
Yeah,
notice.
little bit.
I got a couple more.
24/7,
Little bit.
365 days.
Finance doesn't need AR-15s.
They
No,
might.
we don't
They
generally
might,
use those.
depending on how this tonight goes.
Not yet. So clerks, on the other hand. Right.
Chief, what's the big drop in the prosecutor attorney fees?
We're anticipating going down, right now we currently have 2 village prosecutors. We're anticipating dropping down to 1, eliminating the service for 2. We feel we can do with 1, and that would be the biggest savings. You'll also see, I'll answer the question before you ask, why we went from 27,000 for the second prosecutor down was only 3,350, and we're going back to 15. If we drop to the 1 prosecutor, that would have been the second prosecutor is Linda Pazinski. We didn't know what to expect the first year with the multifamily housing and the permits and the acceptance we were going to get with people applying. And if a lot of people did not take out the permits or did not do what they have to, we anticipated a large court action. So that's why we budgeted high last year. Linda also would do too, is if there was no code enforcement violations, she would go to court, thus saving us money.
How come there's no money budgeted for repairs of your equipment?
Because they just buy new when it breaks.
Makes sense. Thank
It's the police department. What can I say?
The repairs are in there, usually out of miscellaneous. If you,
Miscellaneous.
you'll see, well, other than maintenance servants, I mean, you'll see in there that that's mostly where our repairs at. That's our maintenance contracts as well as repairs. You have radar communication, radio repairs, radar gun repairs, fire extinguisher maintenance. That's where mostly that's in there. Typewriters.
Okay. The generator.
Yes, ma'am. As anyone knows, our generator recently, within the last 3 months, I believe, had an incident where mice made a nest inside the generator, and thus, when the generator started up, and because of the rodents and things associated with rodents like that, fried the generator. So we have a replacement, and so we have purchased a new one, and I believe it gets installed within the next 2 weeks.
Is it going to be rodent-proof?
Feline.
We will have the exterminators in there as well, too, and running it a little bit more often, we think, but in the winter, we plan on having the exterminators try to do the best they can to prevent it from happening again.
Range cleaning. How does this factor in with range? Lots of work to be done.
Not at all, 2 separate things. We're required by EPA to have range cleaning. It's lead. It's a contaminant. It's a hazardous material. So we cannot just go in there and sweep and vacuum ourselves. We have to hire a EPA-approved company. They come, they pick it up and ship it, and it's disposed of as hazardous waste. You'll see an increase this year because there was a price increase. There was a huge reduction from the 2009 to 2010. We were up to $5,000 last year. We went to the vendors and we checked with competitive vendors, and they reduced their price down to $3,000. How it's up $100 just as a price increase. Not to do this has nothing to do with the repairs. This is just a range cleaning. It's done twice a month. I'm sorry, twice a year.
Okay. The water damage repair under miscellaneous, is that to the downstairs hallway there, outside the range?
We had a,
Dehumidifier?
the server room has a water-cooled cooler. The drain became plugged, covered in July, I believe it was. The water overflowed the bin and went down into the basement. The carpeting in the inner walls of the roll call room and walls between the roll call and the first and second floor had to be mediated for mold, as well as drying out the carpet. We had, on a Sunday morning, we went to Bales, bought dehumidifiers, fans, borrowed fans from the fire department, and were able to save the carpeting and save how we did have to have ServPro come out to mediate the mold to avoid there's any mold problems. We have since taken steps to make sure that that drain does not become blocked again, as well as we believe now with the closing of the communications center that we'll be able to move the air conditioner into the server room and thus save on the water-cooled expense and use.
Tom, why are you spending so much money for cruising nights?
I believe that was $50. Yeah. $50 is for
Is
the
that for
water.
squad car
To be
night?
quite honest with you, last year, as a gift to the officers, I bought each officer a gift out of my own pocket because I wanted to
Can't believe
appreciate
it's only
them.
$50.
What
Come on.
happens is the Westmont Special Events Commission pays for the dinners, and our lifesavers, the Westmont Citizens Police Academy, help us in situations like this.
I mean, it's just amazing when you look at that night, and this is your expenditure. It's
$50 for the water.
very well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Explain to me again about the AR-15s. Was this, last year we were told, if I remember correctly, that you wanted them all to be of the same make and model for consistency, and some had aged. Are we still rotating new ones in? What's going on?
These are our replacement plan. We're still rotating. We want to replace 3 a year.
Ever?
Until we get our current stock completely I believe it's 14 marked cars. I believe it was 12. So last year we bought 3. We reduced it from 4 down to 3. This year we would again like to buy 3 again to keep that replacement program going up. You'll also see in the new item this year is weapon lights, 8 of them. Last year our officers responded to a call where they had to deploy the AR-15s in a nighttime situation. And in doing so, they discovered they had a hard time illuminating the offender and the scene while trying to hold an AR while holding a flashlight. So we have equipped 1 AR so far. We'd like to equip the rest with flashlights that are mounted on the weapon itself. The officer can toggle a button and illuminate the subject or the area as he's searching, rather than trying to hold a flashlight, trying to hold an AR, and try to do a scene search. However, we have asked again for 3 ARs to be able again to replace the older ARs that are aging and replace those in the fleet, so we are standard and current in all vehicles.
What happens to the old ones that you
We use them for the
replace?
range. We'll use them for training. We'll also, for the detectives, if they need a weapon. Some have been used for their weapons. We have not sold any yet. We haven't had enough to replace. The ones that we're replacing, the
still
older ones
pretty-
we're taking down and using them secondhand use for other purposes. Right now, we are so short, if we needed we shoot at the range in Lamont. When we go shoot with the ARs, which is required at every shoot in the summer times, we have to pull an AR out of a vehicle to go and do that. It's no problem doing that, but we would like to be able to use those on the range, keep those in the vehicle newer, and also save the wear and tear on those
Makes sense.
and availability. However, at some point, we're going to realize, well, we're not going to start keeping guns just to have guns. At some point, I'm not in favor of selling guns, but we'll see what we would have to do, some way of either to another law enforcement agency or something like that.
The replacement generator, since it's budgeted for upcoming year, was it something that you had to buy, you had to replace, get it installed, but you didn't have the money, obviously, so we're going to put it on upcoming budget?
It's on, I'm
Or is
trying to
this a
figure what's
different
in. No, this is a new one. This is where there was a rental, but this is where the generator was ordered. Was ordered at the end of last year. I believe we did add up to the purchase order, but it was budgeted for the upcoming budget year because it will be installed this June, next
Oh,
week.
okay, it's
So
not
we're
in
in
yet?
that fiscal
No,
year.
it's going to be installed in 2
okay.
weeks. I believe I want to say the 14th, but don't hold me to that. And the reason for the new generator is even though the communication center is not there, we do have anticipate, and we're still in the planning phases of moving the Emergency Operations Center for the EMA into the center, and also you have the fire quarters, which are occupied, and the firefighters are there 24/7 still, so they need heat in the winter and cooling in the summer.
Under printing and binding, what's the basic officer training replace? And then you've got it listed for 2 officers. What's that?
That's under conferences and training.
Oh, okay. No,
That-
it's above that. See the last line? Under printing
Administrative,
and
I have
binding?
administrative tow forms on mine. I have conferences and training, and then there's basic officer training too, and those replacement. That's if we were to send 2 officers to the basic recruit training.
No, just above
It's
that.
printing and binding, the section above it.
Just the section above, last item in the section above.
Basic officer training replace.
On mine, I have it below conferences and training. It should just, that should be down from printing and binding down under conferences and training.
Yeah, the number is the same, okay.
But I don't have
See.
this. This is
Okay.
under conference
Just
training.
somehow got put in 2
That
spots.
looks odd.
Yeah, because you've got, below it, you've got, okay.
See what happened? It's just,
You've got
it's
the,
just down there
under
twice.
printing and
That
binding.
should be under conferences and training.
And then you've got retirees too for the same number budgeted last year, with no budget this year.
Wrong row.
Correct. Again, we're just budgeting
Okay,
for this year for only 2.
So,
We're hopeful that out of the, 3 officers that are remaining to be hired, that we're hopeful that all 3 will be from the certified hired list, and we won't have to expend this. We, however, though, anticipate that if they are not, and we have to hire 2 officers, 2 of the officers that are hired with no experience will have to go to basic training. And also half of that is reimbursed by the Illinois Standards and Trainings Board as well, too. However, we do have to pay it out first and then we're reimbursed, so we did have to budget for the full expense.
that's fine. I was just worried that it was an extremely expensive training manual.
No, that should be, I have it on mine. There was a misprint. That should be down 1 more line under conferences and training.
Make sure it gets.
That is not printing and binding.
Okay.
And we don't print the officers or nor bind them.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly understand the training issue.
We'll make sure it's moved.
And then miscellaneous training,
Yes.
okay? It was budgeted 4870. You actually expended 3140, so you know what it was for, because you came up with the number of expense, and then it's budgeted for 5525. What's the miscellaneous training?
Miscellaneous training is, one of the reasons why it's reduced a little bit is that this year, what I attempted to do was take some training that we knew was going to happen and pull out a miscellaneous and give it its own line item. That's why you'll see that some of the trainings are new. The miscellaneous training is in case we didn't have a class that's budgeted. We have NEMERT classes, you have IRMA classes, you have other classes that we just didn't have a line item for that we want to send an officer to. We may have a supervisor's course, or you may have a certification course that at the last second we come aware of that we want to send an officer to. So the miscellaneous training is pretty much a catch-all for training that we want to send somebody that's not covered by a line item. And we upped it a little bit because last year we cut back on training as a budget concern. A lot of the training, because of our staffing level at this point, requires overtime. And trying to keep the overtime under control, training was reduced. And we're hopeful that we can be able to start sending our officers back to more training.
I don't disagree with you. I just think that when you go to the expense under dues and subscriptions, associations, conferences, we know exactly where you're going, and we look at it and we go, this is great. If I had my druthers and it's not a big deal, I would like to see the training specified out, because then we can definitely say, obviously, our officers need taser training, they need, ground combat training, whatever it is that they're going to go to, it's definitely.
I can give you the list of classes and training that we have, we send people, officers to. It's kind of hard to budget for a class because some classes may come up that we weren't aware of.
Okay.
That, we feel, ooh, we need this. Perfect example, there was an emergency medical training or medical training for tactical response for officers. Sergeant Schlicker was sent to that. Well, that just came up recently. We don't have the budget, that's why we use the miscellaneous. I can gladly give you the training that we, sent that out. It's training that comes up at the last second that we don't budget for.
Well, that's
that we
okay
wanna
then.
send someone to.
I'm just telling you because I know there's a lot of stuff.
Just attach an addendum to it as to what it is. That's all.
We can. I mean, if I listed them all there, there'd be a lot because there's a lot of individual classes, but I can get you a summary of the class training that we went to within the last year.
And given the time frame we had to prepare this, when you look at the vendor detail that they had to work with,
Yep.
a lot of these were reimbursements to individual officers, so it would have required more research
Okay,
for them.
that's all right then. I mean, I'm just,
And the dues and
well, there's some that, shouldn't be a surprise.
dues and subscriptions, you will see that, those are just the dues to join the International Chiefs of Police, that's my dues for the year. Last year's conference, I attended the conference down in Orlando, Florida. However, the village only paid for the registration fee. I paid for transportation, hotels, and meals on my own. Because that's the way it is. I mean, and that's the way you'll see most of the administrators in the police department. If they want to go to a training out of state, they do so at their own expense. They don't do it. The village will pay just for the registration. It's upon us to pay for their transportation. That's why we were going to go to the FBI National Academy annual conference this year. It's in Long Beach, California. We're not going. Probably we're not going to go because of the cost.
Tom, wouldn't some of your training be sort of recurrent, or maybe it's a class that is annually attended, as opposed to where some of the ones in miscellaneous might be more of a spur of the moment, one-time thing, where next year we're not going to have that same class?
Exactly.
So it's sort of...
We get flyers for training, as I'm sure all the other departments do daily, and we prioritize them. Is this a training that's needed? Is this a training that's going to benefit us? Most of the training, what we'll do is we'll send an officer, and it's a train-the-trainer type, but he'll come back and he'll train. So then that way, I'm not expending the cost to go send someone for training, and we're still benefiting from it. Officers, when they go to classes, most of them are required to come back and provide some type of roll call training to the other officers as well. One very big thing you'll see in there is NEMR, just Northeast Regional Multi-Regional Training. We pay per officer, and that's where the officer can go to most of their training classes for free. However, again, with our staffing, we reduce the training because usually if I don't send the officer at overtime, I have to backfill his open spot when he's gone, and that requires overtime as well. So our training has been reduced to keep the overtime under control.
Tom, would you go to the top of page 8?
I don't have page numbers, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had 2 copies. I was using mine that I have my notes on, so.
We've budgeted just under $21,000 for DUMEG because there wasn't enough funds in the state drug account.
Correct.
But it's got DUMEG, $20,000 plus to be paid from Federal Drug Act. Would you just explain the entry?
Last year, we were able to, the cost for DUMEG is $20,000. DUMEG is based on the number of officers on your agency. I forget the exact number, but it's so much per officer. Last year, we had state drug accounts available that we could use to pay these fees for. We believe we had around $22,000 in our state drug account. So last year, in order to help, meet our budget, we took the $20,000 from the state account and paid our DUMEG fees for that. This year, I believe I have about $2,000, $2,000 to $3,000 left in that state drug account. I wanted to take some, but there's not enough. I would deplete the fund if I took that $3,000, but to DUMEG, so we're back to putting our line item back for $20,800 to pay for DUMEG.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have to stay a member of DUMEG. But what do you mean underneath the to be paid from Federal Drug Act?
That should be the state drug account, and that was last year for the federal year, the 2010 to 2011. It was paid out of the state. That should be the state drug account, not the federal drug account. That's where those funds were taken from. That's what that indicates. This year, we don't have that availability.
Now, if you do seizures during this year, can you use seizure money for Dumeg?
Dumeg, I believe, is billing us now. They're getting close. I believe they bill sometime in June or July. It would be used for next year. Whatever we can accumulate would be put forward towards next year. We also have a federal drug account. We have two. We have a state and federal. We're able to use some of the federal funds for equipment, other things. We believe we have close to $25,000 in that account. We're talking about vests for officers. We're talking about other equipment. We've been taking more out of the federal drug account than we have in the past to help offset our budget expenses for equipment. What you'll see in there for phones for the detectives. Detectives had wanted internet access on their phones. They had wanted the PDA-style phones, and their monthly fees or service or dues. Yeah, so we bought a package. We bought the phones and a package, a service package, out of the federal drug account. We're allowed to do that.
Okay.
So there's, as much as we can, where if a purchase comes up, where we may not have purchased because we didn't put it in the budget, we didn't have enough money in the budget. If I don't go by a want, I go by a need. And if they can show to me that there's a need, and the way it's going to be used, preferably for drug activity, to combat drug activity, we could take it out of the federal drug account.
Patrol, we pretty much are locked in the contract, that one, so. What does the, for uniforms, equipment, et cetera, what is the climate for grants this year? Are they way down? Are they stripped? What's going on?
Well, we've applied for a COPS grant for 2 officers. That was completed by Sergeant Gruen last week. However, I'm not holding my breath on that grant. There are grants out there. We contemplating putting a grant in for in-car cameras. However, the restrictions that the state wanted us to do if we got awarded the grant would have been too time intensive for the staffing. They wanted reports that were just totally unrealistic. We also looked at grants for a live scan, our live scan fingerprint machine. However, we already have one. My thought was to replace it. It's getting to be 5 years old and update the technology. And checking with the grant, we were told if you got one already, you're probably not going to get the grant. It's more for departments that don't have it unless yours is broke or aging. And when we asked, what do you mean by aging? They said 10 to 15 years old. And I said, well, ours isn't that old. We keep our eyes open for grants. We apply where we can. However, there just haven't been that many out there. Grants funding is far and few in between.
Sergeant Gruen, the one that's doing any of the grant writing?
Sergeant Gruen is our grant officer for right now. Yes, he just completed the COPS grant, which they changed the format. I want to say he did it in probably 1 week, but I probably took him about 2 weeks to complete it because it was very, very time intensive this year.
Is he as good as our Uber grant writer, Dave Weiss?
There's no one better than Deputy Chief Weiss. I'll say that publicly. The man is amazing.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw that in there, so,
However,
it gives Sergeant Gruen something to attain, a goal to.
Deputy Chief Weiss has set the bar high, and when he gets us a multi-million-dollar grant for a communication center, you can't beat that. But it's just, it takes a knack, and it takes time to learn. I mean, you as you start applying, you get more and more. I'd be curious to see how many grants Davis put in before he started getting them. I mean, you just don't get them from the first ones you start. And it's also, too, they look at them. I'm sorry? Right from the start? Yeah. He set that bar high.
Okay, I was just checking because I've heard there's some things that they're pulling funds from, and I was wondering how badly it would affect.
We had heard that the federal government also is cutting back on funding. I look at things from international chiefs all the time, and they're talking about how funding is just being pulled back because of our economy.
Any more questions on police? On a lighter note, Chief, my understanding that we switched over the communication system today entirely with Downers Grove, and it's going completely smoothly with little or no problem.
I will let the fire department talk about there. I've heard there's a little bumps in the road. We had some problems with the 911 connectivity this afternoon. Overall, at 6:30 this morning, we changed over to the consolidated dispatch with the Downers Grove Village Operations Center. They took over our answering the phones of 911 as well as dispatching to our officers, our computer-aided dispatch system. They started at 6:30. I believe it was by 9:30 they were completely done. Our concern was AT&T switching the 911 phones over. When they switched Darien over, it took them 2 hours. They've evidently had a lot of practice in doing this in other areas because when they did ours, it was under 10 minutes. We've had a couple bumps in the road. We're having a little bit of connectivity problems with the computers. I want to, a couple things, thank the fire department, their senior staff. We've been having meetings once a week with Downers Grove. Our counterparts in Downers Grove have worked well together. It's been an outstanding effort. And I also wanted to thank the IT department because they've done the lion's share of most of the work. Glenn is, back at the station right now, still working on it, making sure everything is fine. MDTs, our mobile data terminals, have changed over. It's a little bit of change for the officers, so they're trying to get a little bit used to it. It's a little bit of change on the radios. There's new voices and there's new procedures. But I want to reassure the residents that there is no reduction in service at all by this move. As you'll see in the budget, since this is what we're talking about, there's a huge reduction in salaries and in savings to the village. I want to say close to $300,000. Consolidation is the wave of the future. I mean, it's becoming more and more common. And we think we've hit a positive note by doing with Downers Grove. It's been a win-win for both, and we're looking forward to it. So thank you for bringing it up. It was also a bittersweet moment, too, because yesterday and today we had to say goodbye. We didn't say goodbye. We just said, see you later, I guess is the way we're doing it. All of our dispatchers were hired by Downers Grove and are over working in Downers Grove. Jeff Folsom said today, he goes, it's very strange. You walk through the communications center and it's dead quiet. There's no one there. There's no radios or no phone ringing. He goes, it's very eerie. And yesterday saying goodbye to our friends, like I said, it wasn't goodbye, it was see you later. They're over there now. Our Kim Sello's working the desk over in Downers Grove right now. And this morning you had Kelly Shilgan and Paul McNamara at the desk in Downers Grove working this morning at the changeover. So it went very well, and we're looking forward to an excellent partnership with the village of Downers Grove.
Great. Thank you. A lot of hard work, a lot of staff.
It was, Mary, it was a huge team effort, and we have to thank everyone, finance, the village manager, the fire department, IT, police department, police staff, HR for the labor issues and everything. It was a labor of love, but it's going to be a success. And the end result is it's a non-reduction in services. Our residents are still receiving the same emergency services they've always received, and we're able to reduce our budget. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
A lot of work in this, Tom. Thank you.
It's no problem. I also have to thank, I'm giving credit to my administrative assistant, Deborah Rice. Did the majority of this. We sat down and did things together with my senior staff, my deputy chiefs, but I have to give credit where credit's due. She did the majority of this. And hopefully now I can let her go home. She's been in the office for a week, so.
Moving on to fire then. Questions?
For part-time wages. Frank, it looks like you budgeted it out based on, what was budgeted last year, actual expenses, and then the number. Is this then above it on page 2 where you list everything? Mm-hmm. Is that everything that the part-timers or, paid on call has to appear at, and there's no way to line item it, and you're looking at what the total amount of payroll was?
Well, all of those things were the things that were removed from the budget.
Removed?
Yeah, we don't,
Those are all gone.
those items we're not paying on. We used to, but we no longer.
Yeah, because
Right.
I love looking at your salaries because you save us a lot of money. Thank you.
I believe we're televised, is that right?
Did you want me to repeat that?
So I'd like to say again that we save the village between $2 and $3 million a year.
Yeah.
So that's over $40 million we saved in the last 20 years.
It's pretty amazing.
Which then other village departments are able to benefit, and along with the residents. Those are all the items that were cut. When we went into the meeting, we were told that due to the economic situation is what it was. We went back and eliminated many, many items.
I think we understand the gravity of the situation, and thank you for reminding us of what was cut.
Thank you.
And so when we do the actual budget that goes in the binder, these are all the worksheets. I think in all fairness to the other departments that have also cut things, this reminds us of all the things that you've cut, but we're either going to do that for everybody that they've cut, so the public, when they look at the budget, can see all the things that have been cut out, or we just go back to the line items, that are operative.
But these don't appear in the budget. This is just our
That's what I'm
working
saying.
sheet. Are you saying you want to see it in the budget?
No, I'm saying that's why I'm asking Spencer, is in the actual budget, although these are a reminder, are they in the actual budget?
They are in the actual budget, and they were in there, they've been in there since they got put in there a couple of years ago, where the other budget shows for the personnel for the other departments, it generally shows 39 hours as opposed to the 40 hours. With the fire paid on call a couple of years ago, when we were looking at moving to the furlough time, the fire paid on call obviously don't have the ability to simply work 1 hour less during the week. And so this was the list of things that they came up with, the impacts that will be impacting the public by moving down, by reducing the amount of time they spend at these different things, they're able to reduce the costs. So rather than listing it as the furlough time, the 39 hours, they had listed these specific items. We can remove them.
Well, then we would be
directives.
inconsistent with what we're doing
Yeah.
throughout the rest of the budget. We have listed other things that have been zeroed out.
Right. So
That tells you is the complexity. You're seeing the complexity of the pay structure they had. You look at all those different things that were in there.
But then I think, to play devil's advocate, or else to be fair for the other departments, I think if the other department heads want in the final budget the public to know everything that they have done away with, because obviously this was done away with before even last year's budget, because there's nothing for fiscal year 2010-11, that their budget entries are also complete with all the things that the public has had to do away with based on cuts in every other department, because the public's seen and felt the cuts in public works. They've seen and felt them in police and certainly in fire. So I just want it to be consistent. If it's there to inform the public, we're not wasting your tax money. Look at everything that these departments have had to slash that they didn't want to slash, then we should be consistent with all the departments. That's what I think.
Another item, too, was the fact that we went to the membership, and so that everyone understands that with as many part-time personnel that work here, we told them that we had to cut even more, and we might have to cut personnel. We did cut one full-time person, and we took another full-time person and went part-time with that individual. So we're actually down 2 full-time people. Along with, in addition to that, the membership took a cut in salary rather than eliminate staff. So we could have cut more people, except for they thought that it wouldn't be in the best interest of the village or for their own personal safety to cut staff. And so otherwise we'd be running short on the engines and ambulances. And matter of fact, maybe even eliminating our backup ambulance. So rather than do that, our staff took a pay cut rather than reduce staff. So that has to be noted, that otherwise we would have a lot fewer people doing the work that we need to get done. And, we operate a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week program, and doing it very efficiently, and for the Village of Westmont. And, when you get into your training and all the other items that are here, it's just as important that our personnel get trained and keep up their continuing education to serve the village. We handle more actual life and death situations than any other 24/7 department in the village. And we cannot drop our standards. This last year, in talking to Deputy Chief Weiss, we were able to cut back a lot in our training, but this is only for 1 year. We're not going to be able to do it more than that. Everybody has to step up and take a bite out of the apple on this, and we certainly have done it repeatedly over the years. And so, but we can't do any more. Matter of fact, we lost our dive team due to the fact that we had cut the hazardous duty pay and our dive team pay from the members. And now people are not getting involved with those programs. One of the big draws that you had to Westmont, where we never had to really seek out people to work here, was our good reputation of excellent training, and also the dive team, the hazmat team, the technical rescue. Those are draws for individuals to come to work to Westmont because they know they can use hands-on training, get the best education going, and that's why we have such an excellent department. Right now, that is in jeopardy. So we have a great department, but this is the last year we can take the cuts we're taking.
Spencer, there are a number of footnotes in here in fire's budget. Is there a corresponding list of what they are? For instance,
There is on the electronic version.
okay,
As you hover over the cell, the comment will jump up and you'll be able to see what was typed in there.
okay, because like, for instance, telephone with, budgeted at 9, actual expense 1,700, back budgeted to 9, and it's got footnote 2. So I'm curious as to, I know Glenn had mentioned to me something about money sitting there in the phone account, but,
Yeah, it's just the way the software handles the insertion of the comments, so you'll be able to see it in the electronic version.
well, I'm going to ask this, since there are 38 cells that are listed as 39 cells listed as having additional comments and explanations on the electronic version. I'd like to pass this one to our Monday, June 13th meeting so that I can have a chance and go through all of those cells so that you don't have to, sit here and read them to me. So, because I wasn't able to open the one that I got today electronically, and we got to redo that.
If I can answer your question on the $9,000, that's for our computers and our vehicles. And what has happened is IT has been paying that bill, and the money was never transferred over to IT. So we just caught that. So out of that $9,000, approximately $7,000 go back into IT to pay for those.
Okay.
And we'll still have money left to pay for Verizon cards that we're presently using.
Yeah, so this is the reconciliation from the one that actually was in IT showing like 7,000 that has been moved for 5.
Glenn is way over on his phone bill, and this is probably one.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
But that's, my request is that we pass on fire till next time so we can go through all the cells. Is there anything, now Frank, I know that you just said about this is the last year you can make certain kind of cuts, and we appreciate that. Personally, I'm a stickler for training for professionals, especially in what you do and what police does and public works do, because of necessity for licenses as well as safety. Is the budget as presented that, you know, the worksheet we've got in front of us, is there a problem in your mind that it's too low on training?
Well, we know that it's, what we ask for is what we need to do our job and to do it safely. At the same time, in discussing with Deputy Chief Weiss where we needed to go with this, because we understand the economic challenges out there for the village, this is where we brought it. But we can only do this for 1 year. We have to get back to our original status, and it's just an ongoing, we need our continuing education to keep our standards up, and then also to attract good firefighters to the village of Westmont. And that was one of the big things. When we have people coming in from other departments and almost knocking down the door to get here, Westmont has an excellent reputation. Not only being the Class 2 and being an accredited agency, but due to the fact that our excellent training under Deputy Chief Weiss over these last 20 years has really greatly improved. And so it's something we have to look at. Dave, would you like to say something?
Well, Dave's coming up. Like, for instance, the dive team, you've essentially disbanded it, but you've got it budgeted for training. Is that because a couple members, you need them to stay current so that they can assist in a mutual aid situation?
Well, what we need is for our own. I believe over the last year and a half, we've had, I believe, 3 dive incidences right here in Westmont. Mm-hmm. And so in order to keep up that training, and it's the morale factor too. If you have an active department involved with all these different technical specialties, this draws people in. And Dave, why don't you just mention how that affects recruiting and everything?
Okay, Chief. That 500 for the dive is, we're still going to have shore tenders, line tenders that will respond to Mavis call-outs, so that's part of keeping their training up. Mm-hmm. They train once a month with Division 10. So that's why that's in there. But if I can kind of summarize, 3 or 4 years ago, we had a training budget of $25,000 to $30,000, and this last year we went down to $9,000, and with our additional cuts we had to submit this year, we were around $11,000, and we cut that in half down to like $5,000 or $6,000 just to try to meet our $114,000 we had to cut. So we have 2 years of cuts in training where we're like at bottom out, we're at minimum. And that, what is happening, that the chief's saying is that a lot of the specialty teams, and this is going to be a domino effect, it's coming, we see it as staff. The dive teams now, you're going to see some of the other specialty teams probably going away, only because the incentive is not there for the guys to do the additional training and to stay active and train to be able to fill the requirements. And it's not just happening in our department, it's happening in all the departments in Division 10. Division 10 is looking at charging additional fees to departments that don't participate in specialty teams to try to offset some of those costs, but they're just in the starting process of doing some of that. We've seen a great change, just not in our fire line personnel, but our officers too, with their training and not being able to go to training. We used to send our officers at a minimum of 8 to 16 hours a year for additional continuing ed. We haven't been able to do that in 2 years. So they've not had anything. We've had some in-house stuff, but again, trying to stay up, just like the police department has requirements to keep all their people up to the par. We also have people that have certifications, like Fred was mentioning with his staff, that have requirements that they have to go to certain training, certain conferences to keep their certifications up. We also have that. So that's where we're at with training. This is, 3 or 4 years ago we were at $30,000, we're down to $5,000. So again, it's kind of hard to keep it going. It is starting to affect our recruitment and even our retention, because we used to be the highest paid for part-time firefighters. We're not anymore. And the guys are starting to go work part-time in other departments. And also same thing with the contract. We used to be the highest paid for the contract, but we're not anymore. So we are still retaining some of our contract medics, but some of them are transferring to the higher paid positions. So, and just to follow up, our staff, Lori's put together all this information for all these 39 areas. We have all that tonight. And just to let you know, the accreditation team's going to be here on the 13th, 14th, 15th, and having us come back on the night of the 13th. We're not sure. Craig's not sure yet. We may be involved, our staff, with accreditation that night. So I'm not sure about how many of us will be able to get here on the 13th.
Okay.
So
If you send one rep, that's all.
Well, there's one here. You want us here, we'll be here.
Just, yeah, we don't need the whole crew because accreditation is vastly more important than answering my question.
The other thing you might consider, if you don't think there would be a need for another workshop, we have the date of the 15th, and we could just have the budget workshop on the 15th. The 15th right now is kind of a tentative date, something the board can consider.
Yeah. Well, whatever, date, time, you just let us know. Lori, you'll be there, right?
Lori will jump to attention.
Or I can email my questions.
I would just like to address you the one, it's probably my fault, I over-annotated like crazy, but I just wanted it so if people looked at something and had a question, maybe it could be addressed right there.
That's good.
Some were very specific, like if you saw a blank spot for ladder testing, what we spent for this year. It was actually done, we're holding the invoice because there's several issues that need to be resolved. So I wanted to reflect, we did get the invoice for $1,005, but we're not quite yet paying it. So that's the type of note I would make, is if it was specific to an invoice or an issue. Some of them are as minute as who has the membership under dues and subscriptions. It would just be like a mental note for myself or chief, anybody looking at it. So some of them you will prove very beneficial to look at, but some are just kind of like redundant things about who's got this membership. So I tend to kind of get nitpicky.
Thanks, Lori.
Sorry.
I can verify that. I just went through and glanced at most of them.
Yeah, I was looking at some.
It's pretty detailed, little notes.
This is the precise reason that I'm glad we tabled the initial paying back the water fund, because, as we go through this, I'm not willing to cut on people's accreditations, people's licenses where they need continuing education, necessary training to do all kinds of things. And, if you even look at one of our personnel files for either one firefighter or one police officer, if you look at their training file, I mean, they're usually about this thick on all the things they have to just keep going to. So, at the end of the day, it's very possible that I'm going to say, let's increase the gas tax, let's spread out the payment back to the water fund, and let's increase the training budget. So I'm certainly leaning that way based on what I've tracked over the last number of years in watching the budget, even before I was on the board and then since I've been elected. So,
Well, the fire department is the best bang for the buck in this community. And you keep proving over and over again that that's what it is. And when we ask you to cut your budget, you continually do it. And maybe you do too good of a job on it, Frank, sometimes, because it seems like you just continuously cut it. And I'm not quite sure you can cut it anymore without jeopardizing the quality of service that we're getting from this community. I mean, you're probably at rock bottom right now.
Yeah, we're rock bottom, and there's no more that will go. When I have one of my better lieutenants, matter of fact, he was in charge of the dive team, come up and tell me, and this is the first time I've heard this in all these years, that he doesn't feel that people care about the fire department. I'll just let it go with that.
I think you got your message across tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
and Lori, thanks for all the work. It's a lot of work to put that together.
Public Works budgets are kind of broken out in two different ways. The ones in the general fund are in, I think, 4 categories. There's Public Works admin, which is kind of the cover-all that's for like the good of the entire department, or people that don't fit in any one particular division like myself or Noriel. There is no engineering budget series anymore. And then you've got the facilities maintenance, fleet maintenance, and what's called street operations in here is what we know as the street division. And then you have a whole separate packet labeled water fund, but that would be the water division of the Public Works Department.
Just as with economic development, you'll notice on the wages that, well, in streets you'll notice it, not in administration. Never mind, I'll be quiet for now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Spencer.
Yep. I'll hold that thought.
What's the deal with your telephone fire alarm system?
Well, the deal is I don't know where that comes from or why it gets coded there, but someone else, inserts that, so that's the combination of the services and whatever, IT is providing.
Okay, yeah, because it's budgeted 15, actual's half of that, and well, slightly.
Yeah, I think the trend up to this date was 15, and that was in there. And going up higher in professional services, like I kind of, mentioned it at the last meeting, but like the questions, like the one that says miscellaneous engineering, I mean, it's in there for the reasons that, we don't anticipate in case we do need it, so that we're not stuck saying is like, well, wish we could do that, but it's not budgeted. But you can see that none of it was spent, either. So if it doesn't, come up, we don't spend it for no reason.
Do you do no maintenance services in your building? It'd be page 2, under maintenance services building.
The items that were on there, the 3 that were in the last budget are the, maintenance services would be like, there's like a towel service. So we have put in like, the electric hand dryers and things like that. So each year we've been removing outside services and doing, either with equipment or doing more things in-house. Similarly, you can see like rugs and other eliminated services that were in there. And then similarly, because that's in Public Works admin, to better, like Spencer was explaining before, like with vehicle maintenance, we try and code those things within the division where it occurs to more accurately reflect the cost of that division.
My concern is deterioration, if stuff's like getting old and rotten.
I think when you get to like
dangerous.
street operations section, you'll see stuff in there.
Okay.
This is just the Public Works admin part, so we took it out of
Your office.
general budget and put it in the specific division.
Okay.
Was that a one-time heating and cooling expense, or for the $3,000?
Those are for like the, in the garage, the overhead heater, so it is. Sometimes it's not even a budgeted thing. If something fails, we'll go in there and repair it. Or similarly, I think you'll find that in, other budget too, like in operations. Some of them, we know they're old enough, and if, there's, a half a dozen of them, so if 2 of them kind of go out at the same time, we kind of forecast that the other ones will need attention, and we try and put it off till the next budget can get passed. Other things like uniforms and clothing, even though there's individual uniforms in the divisions, things that would be like for the good of the department, like mass purchase of, I'll just say like a safety shirt, or for seasonal wear, regardless of what division they actually work in. Those types of things would come out of the Public Works admin as well. When you get into conferences and training, just in this section, there's three peoples represented in the budget. Myself, Noriel, as the Public Work, the engineering supervisor, and the 1 administrative assistant. Then you can see right away it goes into facilities maintenance from there. In the overtime section, I'm speaking of facilities, and you'll see this again in operations. We tried to, this last year was the first time we, instead of just having an overtime item, we kind of carved it out into what these types of overtime represent. So you have actually the emergency overtime when the call-outs that we actually don't anticipate, whether they're weather-related or building emergencies in this case because of facilities. And then there's a separate snow and ice control where that's specifically the call-outs that are attributed to snow, weather, the maintenance of the buildings, the depot, and things like that. Custodian meetings is, that's specifically lined out. That's the cost to have this building open for night meetings. And special events would be costs where those employees participate in other special events, whatever they are, whether it's Taste of Westmont. You get individual reports of time we spend on the individual special events.
For your wages, I mean, that was a very close to budget with the blizzard, including the overtime and everything that had to be done. You weren't, I was expecting to see a really big spike, but you weren't too far off, so.
Yeah, the winter as a whole, for that reason, wasn't extraordinary. The blizzard obviously was time-consuming for that half a week, but we did other things that counteracted that we would have done anyway. But a lot of the downtown cleanup, we used to spend a lot more money doing that overnight and on weekends, and we would put it off a day or two. Not put it off, but pick at it over a couple days and do it during the day. So, hauling the snow out of the downtown and things like that. We did a lot more of that on straight time instead of overtime as permitting. And I'll say, with a lot of cooperation from the downtown too, because as bad as the winter was and as long as it took to get to some things, the complaints were kind of lower, than normal. So everybody's participating in this effort.
And you're being conservative on the gasoline allocation, obviously.
Yeah, again, that would be the gasoline allocation for the department. When you get to fleet maintenance, that's one of those ones that's coded out of one department and deposited in another, but the actual expenditure for fuel comes under a fleet, and you'll see two line items, the typical trend of fuel we use, and then the potential increase based on the threat, in the news that we might be hitting $5, a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
That's not divided out anywhere else, just in the fleet section.
A dumb question for you. We get kind of cavalier here at the board with, well, if we're going to do downtown parking, we'll just re-sign it, and if we're going to do an honorary road, we'll just have the signs done in-house. Looking at what we've budgeted for sign materials and sign blanks, are we a little too cavalier with that?
No.
It's down on page 11.
The bottom of page 11, besides the materials in there and other street signs, we have regular maintenance. I forgot what the number was, the many thousands of signs that we tried to. We don't have a sign inventory, and that's one thing you would see in a capital improvement budget would be to do that inventory, because the federal regulations with that manual and uniform traffic control devices requires us to do certain maintenance. So the actual, even though, the expenses that were done might be low, that was done in an effort. Everybody has the general instruction, like, don't be buying anything that, isn't absolutely necessary. And that isn't even by argument. They all are participating. Everyone understands that, the better job that they do, it reflects in the amount of jobs we can save too. So everybody works very hard in cutting the expenses back. But we do know that that's why that one line item, even though 20,000 went to 7 and we're asking for 17, we know we have to change out every road marker and certain warning signs during this next year, because January of next year is one of the deadlines coming up. So we don't have any options in that respect. And honestly, we're doing all of this in-house. He's going to make all of those and install them, and it's a lot cheaper than doing it by contract or having someone come in and change out the whole town. So even though that number goes up, it's still at consider it a savings. Other things go down. It's work zone safety devices would be like barricades. So, it's repair the old and kind of keep reusing what you have. It's things like cones and stuff that tend to disappear throughout the year. traffic paint. It's the amount of striping they can get done in any one summer. That's kind of a weather function, how much we can get done. And then if we can have the opportunity to get ahead on the next year's restriping, we'll do that.
On the gasoline at $4 a gallon, spending $228,000, if it goes up 25%, I kind of think
On page 14?
yeah, a 50%,
I can just tell you that that's a direct calculation, that $225,000 was an immediate pass-through, and that was a very kind of regular trend that we saw in there, so that was a good number. And then we, just for this year, put the potential market increase, and that was based on actual usage and Melissa's calculation that if it goes up what they say it's going to go at the pump, of course we'd pay a little bit less than, pump price, but that factored in, that's her calculation of if the general gasoline costs hit $5 a gallon, this would be our increment.
right, but I'm just saying if gasoline goes up 25%, goes up another $1 a gallon, and your budget of 225 or even your 228 at a 25% increase isn't 125, we could train everybody in the whole village, in every department.
Well, sure. No, I'll say we do that too. You're talking about idling and, we're trying to conserve everywhere in all these
Well,
aspects.
no, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I think the potential market increase budget at $125,000 is about $55,000 too high.
All right, well, I'll get you the actual calculation that derived that.
Because from my standpoint, I'm going to start, I look at that and then I hear departments saying to train people in what they need to train for one department is $25,000, and that would provide a lot of training. So I'm going to be looking for that money somewhere. So, and it's not, I don't think it's taking away from anything in your department, because I think your estimate's high.
I'm not sure, but we'll certainly look at it. I mean, if your typical costs were, $3 or a little bit less, and we're talking $5, it's actually a
40% because I'm figuring on
increase.
four.
But when you're saying gasoline, you're including diesel in that, in two, or is that?
Diesel and the no lead, right?
Okay.
Yeah, gasoline and diesel.
Well, it says potential increase
Yeah.
gasoline.
It's all fuel.
Right.
Yeah, I was taking it as
Assuming
fuel,
everything's
period.
included in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, just my thought.
It's been exciting to see the fuel prices go down, so that might be, worthy too.
Because, so I'll ask you the same question. I mean, L'Oreal has to keep his engineering license current. Other people do in your department. What kind of, in a perfect world, what would you like to see for training and keeping certifications and licenses?
Well, you'll find a lot of them in there. If you go to Public Works Admin, Public Works has, myself and L'Oreal are licensed professional engineers, as is Kim in Economic Development.
Right.
L'Oreal and I each have a different certification, and we have 2 certified arborists in the street operations too.
Yeah, I saw those too.
So all that is actually being taken care of in a minimal way. And there's also, L'Oreal is really good about it, but finding opportunities very low cost, $20, type training ones too. But we look for all those opportunities. The arborist was an increase because we hired another forester with the EAB issue. And the other area you'll see in fleet maintenance is probably one where we wish we could do more training, and that one is scaled back only in that, well, it's not scaled back. It is what's typically been provided in fleet, but there are other things they would love to get into, particularly in taking on more and more fire, apparatus and vehicles, and doing more of that in-house. And you've equipped us with the ability to do a lot more work. And then there's other certifications that we can do too that will allow them to do other things on the fire department vehicles. So that's kind of you were asking for the wish list. That would be one place where we would like to, do continuing training.
Okay.
To, like I said, to increase the capacity of what we can actually do, not just to maintain existing certifications.
So I'll just throw this out here from my perspective, and I don't need it broken down, but I would like a round number from each department head as to what they think is appropriate for training, certifications, and license renewals. Frank and Dave gave us some numbers on where they used to be, where they'd like to be, and where they are. So I'd like the same from you, and Tom, I'd like it from you too, please.
I'll look at it more closely, but what's reflected in the budget is pretty much the minimum to maintain what we have existing.
Is there any more emerald ash borer treatments? budgeted?
Well,
Where is that?
it's kind of, it's not just laid out by itself. There are in the capital improvement budget, there are costs and grant revenues related to that. But the emerald ash borer is kind of, you'll see in operations, there's a lot of forestry equipment and those costs went up. But then there's professional services that went down, like the tree removal and stuff. So because we have the other forester, so far we've been able to do all the removals in-house. You let us get a stump grinder, so we know, because we have so many of it going on, we don't have to rent that or service that out, and that's going to be cheaper too. So the equipment needs went up, but the services went way down, and we stay ahead of it that's kind of time permitting. So as you know, in Oakwood, we're kind of radiating from the actual spottings. Indian Trails approached us, and on their own, they want to consider a chemical treatment of their parkway trees. So I believe the permit's been issued for that. So the ability to do maintenance on the public trees. Unfortunately, that's going to be an annual, forever type maintenance, or at least until the bug's extinct.
Yeah.
But they're willing to take that on at least for this year.
Yeah,
So
'cause
another
we did
example
that
where the public's
down by Sue and I,
participating.
too. All right.
And this draft budget provides for a total of 40 trees, replacement of 40 trees right now. Is that correct, the 10,000, Steve? Right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, on page 11,
Yeah.
the Parkway tree item is called 0, but we have a separate line item in there for EAB Parkway. But that didn't, was that 40? Oh, it was 40 trees, but we've already taken about 120 down, so it's a fraction of what we put, what we've removed.
Yeah, CAB Parkway. Okay.
At the Public Works Committee, that's one of the topics I'm going to bring up. There's interest in residents want to buy a tree and, have us replant it. And that's an issue we don't have to get into tonight, but they cost participation, to maintain the tree replacement program. That's just this Monday. We'll be talking about that.
In water, we have a huge overtime bill. Is that something that can be alleviated by hiring somebody part-time rather than paying all this overtime?
The wages overtime in water, did you say?
Yeah.
Is actually down from the budgeted amount. So the 140 that was in last year, would have been a trend, and that has to do with, that's pretty much directly related to water main breaks. So that's something we can only use historical trend, but as we do the water main replacement program, the amount of breaks have gone down too. So we've been whittling that back. So the 140 budget was a $117,000 expenditure, and then therefore the next year's request is down too. So we're hoping that trend's going to continue. That's, other than the special event entry in there, that's all just based on unknown water main break.
Is that the Crankers, the special event?
Yeah. It can be. I bet they'd be interested in
Okay.
out on Cass Avenue somewhere. Water's, pretty consistent. There are a lot of items here that were one time for the past year, so there's zeros in the current column. Maintenance service. The IT one, like in water, is not coded in there yet. We don't. That is, I don't know if it's Glenn's time or IT services that they provide, but that all gets booked over when the year is closed out. Maintenance supplies other on page 4 for water. Those are like brass goods. That's a number, items in there are kind of driven by permit. So those are just what they are, and whatever they are, they're offset by the revenue that would be for the permit fees as well. But the hydrant replacement program is kind of consistent, but the further down, like on page 5, you see the meter system improvements, and these numbers went way up, and we talked about that at the Public Works Committee. That's to get, start the process with the 15-year-old water meters and that replacement. So those numbers are high, but that's because we're initiating the new program for that. Right above that, the building purchase improvements, the number that was budgeted but not spent and then rebudgeted was just something we didn't get to, so it was put off, and you can call it a carryover if you want, but...
On page 5, are the Burlington Construction and Lincoln Construction, were those carryovers for last year and
they
then
were
the actual expenses?
carryovers from the year before into last year, so we're done paying for the construction for that. Somewhere else is the, you go all the way to page 7. It's called Road and Bridge Expense, or 8084. That's where you see the repayment for that EPA loan. So every year there's going to be $100,000 in there from now on to repay that. And then below that is the new installation stock. So that's another permit-driven category. You can see we budgeted $20,000, which we thought was a reduction, and only $6,000 spent. It's an indication of low permit activity.
Ground storage tank maintenance ended up being much higher than...
You know, what that was is that's just the way it was booked. We planned that. Those are the 2 ground storage tanks, and we were trying to do 2 fiscal years ago and have that finished and get paid for before the next one. But by the time the bills happened, they kind of all got booked in the same year.
So there was money that had been budgeted.
Right, from the previous year.
Okay. Yeah, because that's...
It's like double, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like over 200,000.
Good for Public Works.
What's on 7? What's the payment in lieu of taxes?
That is a payment to the Capital Projects Fund. The theory behind it is if the water were a typical utility, they'd be paying a utility tax. And a portion of our utility taxes all go into the Capital Projects Fund. And so, as is typically done, this utility, because it's an enterprise fund, because it's treated as if it were a company, it has to contribute something to the village, so it pays payment in lieu of taxes into capital projects.
Okay.
right, and then the last one, and it's out of order, and I apologize, but it's information technologies.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
You know, don't think Glenn is here right now, but if there are any questions we can't answer, we can get back to you on them.
Here he comes.
Oh, poor Glenn.
Here he
That's
is.
where he does his run-in to answer the question.
It's Glenn.
It's been a long day for you, hasn't it?
Good timing.
Yes.
He intentionally saved you for last.
Glenn, what happened with the main T1XO?
I have not gone through that yet. I do know
Okay.
it's over from what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And we also have AT&T circuit lines that are in there that are unbudgeted as well. We did find some of that money was still had not been transferred from fire yet, so we need to go through the rest and find out where the rest of the money didn't get transferred from when it got moved into our account.
Okay. Now, all of the, for the door access maintenance and police and the closed circuit innovations as a result of, those expenses are all as a result of closing the police department and giving access to people to get in. They'll be on camera and the lockout system with the door buzzer and all that?
Some yes, some no. Some were, some of the door access controls were maintenance that we had already paid on the system that was there. There was additional costs for adding on the additional doors and some of the additional equipment that we added.
Okay. So that's IT and not police, though, when it comes out to budgeting it?
Correct.
Previously, it was budget, the original door access, just the door access portion was in police. Now that amount, as well as the additional amounts due to moving the dispatch center, are all in IT. It's sort of been consolidated.
We're in the process of collapsing all those into one main system that will run all the buildings at some point.
Are we buying all of our computer hardware rather than leasing it?
Yes. We also build most of our own equipment, so we save
Okay,
quite a bit of money.
okay.
When we had the consultant here and that we looked at leasing, the problem with leasing is you tie yourself into a replacement cycle in a way. And since we run our stuff way beyond normal turnaround.
Would you explain what you found about, a little bit, Ron was explaining about the software that would allow us to do this quickly with the budget?
Yeah. I contacted MSI, asked them if there was a way to tie, when we do a purchase order, to pick a budget line item and to tie it to that line item on the purchase order. One, it would help us because we would know as we spend down a specific line item in the budget. And then you'd be able to run reports on that at any time throughout the year. So when you do a PO, if you're going to do purchasing of cables, you would then go find that line item that you put the cables in and tie it to that.
Okay. How much is that software and is it compatible?
Well, it's a custom on top of MSI. So it's the company that makes the software will write the custom app. I think it was $7,000, Ron?
We were wondering, we were guessing, I thought it was lower than that, but I think Spencer, you thought it was around 5.
I thought it was something over 5.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
I think it was 7, but and then there was like a $980 a year maintenance fee for that additional.
Yeah, because if it saves the departments from having to go back and do this, and it allows us to see where we are on things that are, you might get pretty volatile or unexpected throughout the year, you know.
It would actually, I mean, honestly, it would be helpful from our standpoint as far as being able to watch the budget, since we don't encumber purchase orders right now. Be a way to watch what we're spending out of our budgets that were in the budgeted line item, because that pretty much disappears once you end up in your fiscal year, so.
So would you find out and then put it into your budget? Because I'd like to see what that comes out.
It's 6.
6?
6 even.
We got a quote already, so we have an exact price from them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to scroll down. That was the base price. It's $7,050.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, good.
So you think, Spencer, you think it would help? Or you think
If it
it's-
works, yes. Yep.
I think the question would be how frequently would we be doing this? Because I don't think to spend $7,000 to do this once or twice a year makes sense. But if it's something we want to see, if we're going to get use out of the program, then by all means, it's a good expenditure. But, you know, what's the need? We haven't defined the need yet.
It's a one-time cost, so.
But I
and
mean,
then
we haven't defined how much we'll be using that.
My
which I think
concern
we
is
need
that
to
it
do.
allows the departments to see where they are within budget, whether they're, you know, they've got some wiggle room if something comes up, or whether they've gone way over. Or let's say in a fiscal year from, you know, May to May, if November, you're about tapped out on a line item, you better be, you know,
We can figure out what's going wrong.
right.
Unlike where
So-
we have all that money lumped into
so-
telephone.
Wouldn't the software more be streamlining what they're already doing? Because they're doing that every month now for their own internal operations of their department, correct?
The only thing is, that you
Yeah.
do, but it's lumped under one general item. So the more items you have underneath an account number, the less you have the detail of what's being spent out of each one of those budgeted line items.
Glenn, do you know when you talk to them, is this a customization they've done before elsewhere?
No, if it was, it would be a lot cheaper. It would probably be a feature. And this will
was-
probably end up being a feature in the next
When I
version.
read the quote, it does say part of the cost is the discovery phase in terms of figuring out
So
what
we
we
get
want.
to, we get to pay for them to,
That's sort of,
Yeah,
to
it's a
come up
little
with it,
open.
to market to other people.
Yeah.
sounds like it's pretty custom.
Maybe give them the idea, now they'll do it and we can buy it.
Yeah, so we'll wait and,
Till the price comes down.
It's not uncommon. I'm to be first
Yeah, I
to
know.
use something.
all right, well, it seemed to me like it would have been around, but hey, what do I know? All right, forget what I said about budgeting.
It was a good idea.
It's a good idea. It'd
Just,
be good to wait.
you know, every once in a while, bug them and see if they've done it for somebody else yet.
Or if they'd like to reduce the price in order to have a guinea pig to work on, then you know, we look at it that way too.
Yeah. If they'd like to pay me the royalty for coming up with the idea.
Yeah.
You have a target price? I could bounce it back off them.
$25.
$1,051.
We did that with the iConnect, and we got them to drop it 50%.
Right.
Any other questions? Done?
Not on IT, thanks,
good.
Glenn.
Yeah, once we're done with consolidation, I want to rip apart the phone side of it, so,
Right.
I understand that.
thanks.
Thank you. It's not even limp.
I think
No, it's doing
Frank
good.
Trout comments are well taken this evening regarding cutbacks in your department. But I think that applies to all departments across the board. As we move forward with this, I think it's real important for us to come back and, as has been indicated, make sure that we take those steps that are going to ensure maintenance of one of the best fire departments in the county. You know, we didn't lose our state money, what, for another year, perhaps?
Well, the thing I was going to say is, you know, what we're experiencing is not unusual. I mean, this is happening to all communities, all departments. That's why there's a significant concerted effort across the county now looking at consolidating public safety services. So, you know, I remind the board, you know, the concept that we heard a couple of years ago is what is the new normal? You know, are things ever going to be back to what they used to be? I don't think so. And I know the chief understands that. He and I have had many discussions about that. I think he's expressing his frustration with the situation we're all dealing with our finances. You know, we hope that we'll be able to restore a lot of things. A lot of the reason that you see those things in the budget, that we don't have line items any longer, is we put them in there with the hope that we would be able to restore them.
Right.
And in the fire department case, because they have such a unique operation, it's been so successful for so long, they've had this very complex pay system that's worked well. It's provided a lot of attraction, I guess, to high-quality people. And certainly we do hope to be able to restore it at some point. But I don't want to pretend like things are going to be like they were 10 years ago, because I don't.
Well, just like the ETSB not giving out funds unless you consolidate, and Springfield was looking at doing all kinds of consolidations between various entities, and they were going to start with the townships and all that. So it's real possible that somebody's going to start dropping the hammer on funding above and beyond, what we fund from our municipal accounts. But when we start looking at what we get from governmental entities, they may just say, unless you start consolidating, there's no money. So
Frustration the chief's expressing is that our department is so efficiently run when you compare it to other departments. And a lot of other communities, departments, fire districts are jealous of how we do it.
Right. I'm not saying that people are wise in what they do in Springfield. I'm just saying they like to do
The reality.
things.
But anyhow, we have to look at that very, very carefully to ensure no slip in service to our residents to the best of our ability. That's why we're all sitting here, and it is scary in certain respects to think of what we're facing. But I think staff here and the board has kind of been in the forefront of staying ahead of the game and making those cuts a lot sooner than a lot of the other villages around here. But we are near the bottom of the barrel, and hopefully things will start to come back here, turn around. But I just appreciate all the work and sacrifices that everyone has made to keep the services provided. And it's you can't do that forever, but we certainly have a wonderful, dedicated staff that's just been unbelievable in meeting the challenges that we've been faced with in the past few years. Before we adjourn, we were given instructions earlier by Spencer to make sure that we congratulated Virginia Simsky, our village clerk,
Yes.
on becoming the head honcho of the clerks of DuPage County. So she's in the back of the room,
third year.
all gussied up and acting her celebration.
Normally, she's not.
No. Thank you, Jane. Congratulations. Anything else to be discussed before we adjourn?
I just want to throw one thing out there. I was reading a letter in the progress, a letter to the editor from a gentleman who, I really wish that people would take as much time and pay attention to these things as they do sitting down to write these asinine letters, where he said he was willing to lead the march on City Hall to say, quit raising our taxes and, give us better services and all that. And, it's the proverbial blood out of a turnip. And it's really, it insults all of us. And it's a bigger insult to all of the people that work for municipalities, that from the department heads right on down to our seasonal employees, for somebody to say, you guys are wasting my tax money, because these guys are just about scraping skin off of everything in order to do their jobs. So for what it's worth, I take it as an insult to everybody that works at this village, certainly.
I'm not insulted because I don't read them.
My final comment is thank you for the microscopic view of what is going on.
Yeah, good job, everyone.
Financially in this village. Kudos to everyone. And with that being said, I would accept a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So move, Seneca.
Second, Scott.
Yay.
Okay, adjournment roll call. Trustee Emery?
Yes.
Trustee Fleming?
Yes.
Trustee Nero?
Yes.
Trustee Scott?
Yes.
Trustee Seneca?
Yes.
Thank you. It's adjourned.